The flood should have ended everything. 150 days of water covering every mountain. All flesh perished. But then, 400 years later, 12 Israelite spies returned from Canaan trembling. They saw giants, descendants of Anak, men so large they felt like grasshoppers before them. If the flood killed all the Nephilim, where did these come from? Genesis chapter 6 opens a window to a world that no longer exists. The sons of God saw that the daughters of men were beautiful. They took wives for themselves from all they chose, and the Nephilim were born. The Hebrew word literally means the fallen ones, or those who cause others to fall. They were not simply tall men. They were hybrids, something that should not exist according to the natural order of creation. A biological anomaly that corrupted the human lineage so deeply that God determined to restart everything. The biblical text is direct. There were giants on the earth in those days, men of renown, warriors of fame, and the wickedness of man multiplied upon the earth. Every imagination of the thoughts of the heart was only evil continually. God repented that he had made man. He determined to destroy all flesh under heaven, not just the Nephilim. All flesh, because the contamination had spread beyond what could be repaired by conventional means. Then came the flood. The ark floated for 150 days while everything died below. 7 billion tons of water per second falling from the sky for 40 days. Fountains of the great deep breaking open, mountains submerged, all flesh that moved upon the earth expired, birds, domestic animals, wild animals, reptiles, and every man. Everything that had breath of the spirit of life in its nostrils, everything that was on dry land, died. The Nephilim were included in that sentence. 8 people survived: Noah, his wife, 3 sons, and 3 daughters-in-law. 8 people carrying the future of all humanity. 8 sets of DNA that would repopulate the planet. And when the waters receded, when the ark rested on the mountains of Ararat, when Noah released the raven and then the dove, it seemed that the chapter of the giants had been permanently closed. But the book of Numbers, written centuries later, mentions Nephilim again, and not as historical memory, as present reality. The spies saw the land of Canaan and found the sons of Anak, who are descendants of the Nephilim. The Hebrew text does not use comparative language. It does not say similar to or as large as. It says descendants, direct lineage, genetic connection. Here begins the mystery that has intrigued scholars for millennia. 3 theories dominate the academic and theological debate. The first suggests that the term Nephilim in Numbers 13 is hyperbolic language. The spies, terrified by the stature of the inhabitants of Canaan, used the most frightening name they knew to describe what they saw. They called the Anakim Nephilim, not because they were genetically related, but because the word carried the weight of ancestral fear. It was like calling someone a monster today. Emotional description, not scientific. This theory has serious problems. The biblical text rarely uses exaggeration when describing enemies. Numbers are specific in other passages. Goliath's height is recorded with mathematical precision, 6 cubits and a span. The weight of his armor as well, 5,000 shekels of bronze. If the biblical writers merely wanted to say that the Canaanites were tall, they had vocabulary for that. They could use Gibborim, which means mighty men, or simply describe the stature in measurements. They chose the word Nephilim deliberately. The second theory is more disturbing. It suggests a second incursion. If the sons of God descended once and took human women, nothing would prevent them from doing so again after the flood. Genesis 6 verse 4 contains a phrase that fuels this interpretation. There were Nephilim on the earth in those days and also afterward. 2 words that change everything. And also afterward. Some scholars interpret afterward as reference to the period immediately before the flood, a temporal clarification within the same context. Others see a prophetic indication that the phenomenon would repeat. The book of Jude in the New Testament mentions angels who did not keep their proper domain, but left their own abode. They are reserved in everlasting chains, under darkness, for the judgment of the great day. 2 Peter speaks of angels who sinned and were cast down to Tartarus, reserved for judgment. If there was specific punishment for angels who crossed forbidden boundaries, this suggests the event was singular and those responsible were imprisoned. They could not repeat because they are imprisoned. But could other angels have attempted the same after the flood? The problem with this theory is the absence of biblical record. Genesis 6 documents the first incursion with details. If there were a second, it would be reasonable to expect the scriptures to mention it. Biblical silence does not prove it did not happen, but significantly weakens the argument. The third theory is the most accepted among conservative scholars. The gene was in the ark. Noah was perfect in his generations. The Hebrew word used is tamim, which means complete, whole, without defect. Some interpret this as moral purity. Noah walked with God. He was righteous in his generation. Others see an additional indication of genetic purity. Noah did not carry the contamination of the Nephilim in his DNA. His lineage remained intact from Adam through Seth, without mixture with the corrupted descent. But what about his daughters-in-law? The Bible names Noah's sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. It mentions their wives only as the wives of his sons. No names, no genealogy, no information about their lineages or families of origin. If one of them carried recessive genes from the mixture between humans and the sons of God, that genetic information crossed the flood inside the ark itself, protected by the same walls that protected Noah. Think about the generational mathematics. A recessive gene can remain dormant for several generations. Parents can carry the trait without manifesting it. Children can receive it from both sides and still not express it. But eventually, when two carriers meet and the right combination happens, the phenotype emerges. After 400 years, approximately 16 to 20 generations, genetic recombination could produce individuals where these characteristics manifested again. Not identical to the original Nephilim, but carrying extraordinary physical traits. Extreme stature, tremendous strength, abnormal bone structure, perhaps even polydactyly. This would explain why post-flood giants appear in specific groups and limited geographic regions. They were not scattered throughout the earth. They concentrated in defined territories. The Anakim lived in the mountainous region of Hebron. The Rephaim occupied specific territories east of the Jordan. The Emim inhabited Moab. The Zamzumim or Zuzim were with the Ammonites. The Avim dwelt in villages as far as Gaza. Each group had its own name, defined territory, distinct culture, and all shared the same characteristic, stature that terrified entire peoples. Deuteronomy chapter 2 offers a detailed map. Moses is recounting the journey through the wilderness and mentions every giant people they encountered or bypassed. The Emim dwelt in the land of Moab previously, a people great, numerous and tall like the Anakim. They were also considered Rephaim, like the Anakim, but the Moabites called them Emim. The Horites also dwelt previously in Seir, but the sons of Esau dispossessed them. The pattern is consistent. Giant peoples occupied territories, other peoples displaced them. Sometimes by military conquest, sometimes by demographic pressure. The giants were not invincible. They were defeatable, but they required extraordinary effort. Og, king of Bashan, slept in a bed of iron that measured 9 cubits long and 4 cubits wide, 4 meters by 1. M.8. Furniture of that size is not built for someone of normal stature. The text of Deuteronomy chapter 3 specifies that the bed could still be seen in Rabbah of the children of Ammon. It was physical evidence, verifiable artifact. Any Israelite doubting the story could make the journey to Rabbah and see with their own eyes. Og ruled 60 fortified cities in the region of Bashan, high walls with gates and bars, besides many unwalled cities. His kingdom was vast, prosperous, well defended, and he was the last of the Rephaim. When Israel defeated him at Edrei, the Rephaim lineage as a political entity ceased to exist. Only scattered descendants in other regions remained. Goliath measured 6 cubits and a span, approximately 2 meters and 90 centimeters. To contextualize, the average height of an Israelite man at that time was about 1 meter 60. Goliath was almost double. His coat of mail weighed 5,000 shekels of bronze, 60 kilos of metal just in the torso armor. The head of his spear weighed 600 shekels of iron, 7 kilos. The man carried military equipment that common soldiers could not even lift, much less use in combat. And he had 4 brothers, all warriors of similar proportions. 2 Samuel chapter 21 lists the confrontations. Ishbi-Benob, whose spear weighed 300 shekels of new bronze and who was girded with a new sword, intended to kill David. But Abishai, son of Zeruiah, came to David's aid, struck the Philistine, and killed him. Saph, another giant, was killed by Sibbecai the Hushathite at Gob. Elhanan, son of Jare-Oregim of Bethlehem, killed Goliath the Gittite, whose spear shaft was like a weaver's beam, probably another Goliath or a scribal copying error, since David killed the famous Goliath decades before. And there was a man of great stature, who had 6 fingers on each hand and 6 toes on each foot, 24 digits in total. When he defied Israel, Jonathan, son of Shimea, David's brother, killed him. Polydactyly, genetic anomaly, recorded in scripture as a characteristic of at least one of the descendants of Rapha in Gath. It was not just extraordinary stature. They were specific congenital malformations that indicate something different in the genetic code of that lineage. The Rephaim were called by that name by the Israelites, but each people of the region had their own designation. The Moabites called them Emim. The Ammonites called them Zamzumim. Deuteronomy chapter 2 documents this with ethnographic precision that impresses modern historians. A people great and numerous and tall, like the Anakim. The Lord destroyed them before the Ammonites, and they dispossessed them and dwelt in their place. The phrase repeats as a pattern throughout the text. They were great. They were numerous. They were destroyed. Stature did not guarantee survival. Strength did not guarantee permanence. Smaller peoples with greater determination systematically replaced them. When Moses sent the 12 spies to explore Canaan, the mission was strategic. 40 days of reconnaissance. Evaluate the land, verify if it was good or bad. Observe the people, whether strong or weak, whether few or many. Examine the cities, whether camps or fortresses. Analyze the soil, whether fertile or barren. Check the vegetation, whether there were trees or not, and bring samples of the fruits of the land. 10 spies returned with a negative report. The land certainly flows with milk and honey. This is its fruit. They showed the cluster of grapes from Eshcol, so large that 2 men carried it on a pole. But the people who dwell in the land are powerful. The cities are fortified and very large. We also saw there the sons of Anak. And then came the phrase that changed everything. We saw their giants, sons of Anak, descendants of the Nephilim. We were in our own eyes like grasshoppers, and so we were in their eyes. Grasshoppers. That self-assessment destroyed an entire generation. 600,000 men of war heard that report and chose to believe in the size of the problem instead of the size of the God who delivered them from Egypt. The God who parted the Red Sea, the God who sent the 10 plagues, the God who fed them with manna every morning. That God apparently was no match for tall men living in walled cities. The consequence was immediate. The whole congregation wept that night. They murmured against Moses and Aaron. They proposed choosing another leader and returning to Egypt. They preferred known slavery to freedom that required facing giants. God responded with judgment. No man over 20 years old who came out of Egypt would see the promised land. They would wander 40 years in the wilderness. 1 year for each day the spies spent exploring Canaan. They would fall in the wilderness. Their bodies would be buried in the sand. Only their children, those they said would become prey to the Canaanites, would enter the land. All died, except 2. Joshua and Caleb had seen the same giants, walked on the same soil, measured the same walls, ate from the same fruits. But they returned with the opposite conclusion. Let us go up at once and possess the land, for we are well able to overcome it. Do not fear the people of that land, for they are our bread. Their protection has departed from them, and the Lord is with us. Do not fear them. The other 10 spies died by plague before the Lord. Sudden death. Specific judgment for those who spread fear in the camp. Joshua and Caleb waited 40 years and entered Canaan. 45 years after the initial report, Caleb still remembered. He was 85 years old when he presented himself before Joshua and asked for his inheritance. You know what the Lord said to Moses, the man of God, concerning me and you at Kadesh Barnea. I was 40 years old when Moses, the servant of the Lord, sent me from Kadesh Barnea to spy out the land. And I brought back word to him as it was in my heart. Caleb told his story. His brothers made the heart of the people melt, but he wholly followed the Lord. Moses swore on that day that the land his foot had trodden would be his inheritance and his children's forever. And now, said Caleb, behold, the Lord has kept me alive these 45 years. I am still as strong today as I was on the day Moses sent me. As my strength was then, so is my strength now. 85 years old and strength intact. It was not boasting. It was a fact verifiable by anyone who saw him wielding a sword. Give me this mountain, of which the Lord spoke on that day. For you heard on that day that the Anakim were there, and great and fortified cities. Perhaps the Lord will be with me, and I shall drive them out as the Lord promised. Caleb did not want easy land. He did not ask for irrigated valleys or grazing plains. He wanted exactly the territory that had terrified the previous generation, Mount Hebron, where the sons of Anak dwelt, where the cities were great and fortified, where the grasshoppers of 45 years ago had no courage to tread. Joshua blessed Caleb and gave him Hebron as an inheritance. Joshua chapter 15 records the result. Caleb drove out from there the 3 sons of Anak, Sheshai, Ahiman, and Talmai, the same 3 names mentioned 45 years earlier in the spies' report. They were still there. They were still giants. They still lived in the same fortified cities. And they were defeated by an 85-year-old man who refused to see himself as a grasshopper. The conquest of Canaan was, in large part, a war against the giants. Joshua chapter 11 describes the northern campaign. Joshua at that time went and cut off the Anakim from the mountains, from Hebron, from Debir, from Anab, from all the mountains of Judah, and from all the mountains of Israel. Joshua utterly destroyed them with their cities. None of the Anakim were left in the land of the children of Israel. Only in Gaza, in Gath, and in Ashdod some remained. Gath. The name echoes through the generations. 200 years later, David, still young, faces Goliath in the valley of Elah, the giant of Gath, the same territory where Anakim remained after Joshua's conquest. The lineage survived there in the Philistine cities for 200 years. They mixed with the local population, but the gene persisted, and it produced warriors who terrified entire armies. Goliath was not an isolated anomaly. He was the final product of a lineage that refused to disappear, the result of centuries of anomalous genetics that began before the flood. and crossed the waters inside the ark. When David descended into the valley with 5 smooth stones and a shepherd's sling, he was not merely facing a large warrior, he was facing the legacy of Genesis 6, the distant echo of a forbidden mixture that God tried to eliminate with water and that would now be eliminated with a stone the size of a fist. 40 days. Goliath defied Israel for 40 days, morning and evening, twice a day. 80 consecutive challenges, 80 opportunities for some Israelite to step forward, 80 times that God's army stood in silence while a Philistine mocked the living God. 40 days, the same period the spies spent exploring Canaan, the same period Moses remained on the mountain receiving the law, the same period Elijah walked to Horeb, the same period Jesus fasted in the wilderness before beginning his ministry. Biblical numbers are rarely coincidence. 40 represents testing, preparation, transition. Goliath fell with a stone in his forehead. The projectile penetrated and he collapsed, face down on the ground. David ran, stood over the Philistine, took the giant's own sword, because David had no sword of his own, and cut off Goliath's head. The valley that had seen challenges, shouted twice a day, saw the body of the Philistine champion fallen in the dust. But Goliath had brothers. 2 Samuel chapter 21 records 4 separate battles against giants of Gath. All occurred during David's reign, but at different times. Ishbi-Benob, whose spear weighed 300 shekels of bronze, almost killed David when the king was already old and tired. The text says David was exhausted. The giant saw opportunity. He wanted revenge for the brother killed decades before. Abishai came to the rescue and killed the Philistine. On that day, David's men swore that he would no longer go out to battle with them, lest he extinguish the lamp of Israel. David had become vulnerable. Age was taking its toll. The remaining giants recognized this and tried to exploit it. Saph was killed by Sibbecai the Hushathite in battle at Gob. Another confrontation, another giant eliminated. The lineage diminished with each encounter. Elhanan, son of Jare-Oregim of Bethlehem, killed Lami, brother of Goliath the Gittite, whose spear shaft was like a weaver's beam. 1 Chronicles chapter 20 clarifies it was Goliath's brother, not Goliath himself. And the last giant recorded in Scripture, a man of great stature, with 6 fingers on each hand and 6 toes on each foot, 24 in total, was killed by Jonathan, son of Shimea, David's brother. When he defied Israel, Jonathan struck him down. 4 giants, 4 battles, 4 Israelite victories. All these were born to the giant in Gath and fell by the hand of David and by the hand of his servants. The text closes the section with that summary statement. It was the end of an era. Gath, the last stronghold of the Anakim, lost its extraordinary warriors one by one. After that, absolute silence. No later prophet mentions Nephilim. Isaiah does not speak of them. Jeremiah does not encounter them. Ezekiel does not prophesy against them. No king after David faces Anakim or Rephaim. No battle against giants is recorded. In Kings, Chronicles, Ezra, Nehemiah, or any other historical book, the lineage that terrorized generations simply disappears from the biblical record as if it had never existed. Archaeology offers intriguing but inconclusive fragments. In 1928, archaeologists discovered in the region of Bashan, the ancient kingdom of Og, megalithic structures that defy conventional explanation. Stone dolmens weighing tons, constructions with blocks that would require tremendous strength to position without modern machinery. The region is still called Land of the Giants by local Arab inhabitants. Oral tradition that crossed millennia. In Hebron, where the 3 sons of Anak lived when the spies arrived, excavations revealed Bronze Age fortifications with walls of abnormal thickness, much thicker than necessary for conventional defense. built to defend against something extraordinary or to house a population that did not fit in normal structures. Human bones of unusual proportions have been found in various excavations in the Levant over the past century. Most remain in unpublished academic studies or in museum deposits without accessible public cataloguing. The average height in the ancient Near East was approximately 1.60 meters for adult men. Skeletons of 1.80 meters would already be statistically unusual. Skeletons of 2 meters would be significant anomalies. Skeletons larger than that enter territory that conventional science prefers not to comment on publicly. Og's bed has not yet been found. Rabbah of the Ammonites, where Deuteronomy says it could be seen, is modern Ammon, capital of Jordan. 3,000 years of construction upon construction, civilizations stacked. If the iron artifact existed, it is probably beneath layers of Nabatean, Roman, Byzantine, Islamic and Ottoman occupation. Or it was melted and reused at some point in history, but the absence of complete physical evidence does not eliminate the textual record. The scriptures describe giant peoples with remarkable consistency across books written by different authors in different eras. The names are specific, the locations are verifiable, the measurements are precise. If it were fiction, it would be the most well-coordinated fiction in ancient literature. The central question persists. If the original Nephilim died in the flood, how do we explain the later giants? The recessive gene theory answers the question without requiring additional supernatural events after the flood. The DNA crossed the waters inside one or more of Noah's sons' wives. The manifestation took generations to occur. The groups were geographically limited because they derived from specific lineages that carried the genetic trait. When these lineages were systematically eliminated, first by the peoples who preceded them, then by Joshua during the conquest, and finally by David and his mighty men, the gene disappeared from the human population. Directed extinction, not by evolutionary accident, not by natural selection, by deliberate military campaign executed under specific divine order. Deuteronomy chapter 20 verse 17 is explicit, "You shall utterly destroy them, the Hittites, Amorites, Canaanites, Perizzites, Hivites and Jebusites, as the Lord your God has commanded you." The commandment was complete elimination, not cultural assimilation, not peaceful coexistence, not diplomatic agreement. Total destruction of specific peoples in specific territories. The Anakim were among the peoples listed for destruction. The order was not arbitrary genocide of innocent populations. It was genetic surgery on a civilizational scale, removing from the earth a lineage that should not exist according to the original order of creation. Completing what the flood began, Joshua executed most of the work. He eliminated the Anakim from the mountains of Judah and Israel. Caleb completed the task in Hebron, conquering the cities of the 3 sons of Anak. David and his mighty men finished in Gath, eliminating the last 4 known giants during a period of extended conflicts with the Philistines. 3 generations of Israelite leaders, each facing the remnants of a contamination that began before the flood. Joshua in the initial conquest, Caleb in the specific request for inheritance, David in the final battles. The work was long because the root was deep. The Rephaim received similar treatment in different territory. Deuteronomy chapter 3 verse 11 observes that Og, king of Bashan, was the only one remaining of the remnant of the Rephaim. When Moses defeated him in battle along with all his army at the city of Edrei, the Rephaim lineage as an organized political entity ceased to exist. The king fell. His 60 cities were taken. Only mixed descendants in Gath and some other coastal Philistine cities remained. 200 years of Israelite monarchy eliminated the last known representatives. The scriptures record. Archaeology partially confirms. Questions remain open for continued investigation. Where exactly did the post-flood lineage come from? The most accepted answer among conservative scholars points to the wives of Noah's sons, the recessive gene that crossed the waters inside the ark itself. Other scholars suggest a second angelic incursion after the flood, although Genesis 6 is the only canonical passage that clearly describes the origin of the Nephilim through the union between sons of God and daughters of men. What we know with certainty from the biblical record, peoples of extraordinary stature existed, documented by name and location. They occupied specific territories in the Levant during the Bronze Age. They were defeated in documented battles with verifiable military details, and they completely disappeared from recorded human history. The last biblical mention of a giant is in 2 Samuel chapter 21. After that, the record falls completely silent, not because history ended, but because that specific chapter was definitively closed. The giants who should have prevented Israel from entering the Promised Land became exactly the opposite. Documented proof that no fortress resists, no stature intimidates, and no lineage survives when God decides it is time for his people to advance.